Joe Broz is our moderator. He's the Executive Director and Governing Board Chairman of the QEDC, the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. Joe?
Great, thank you, Yanni.
Thanks. All right, thanks. Do you need this? You need this?
Sure, yes, thank
Sure.
you. Great, well, it's terrific to have the opportunity to present this great panel, and I'm just going to invite them to come on up now, please. And what we'll do is have a very simple format here. Please go ahead and just have a seat. We'll have a quick format, and I'll introduce each panelist, and follow that. They'll each present a little overview of their agency and QIS within their agency. I do apologize for my voice. I'm sorry that it's so rough, but hopefully you'll bear with me. Then what we'll do is we'll have a
I know. What did you think so far? Everything okay? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Yanni, I'm not sure. What do you think? Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is start off with our first panelist is Carl Williams. Carl is the Deputy Director of the Physical Measurement Laboratory at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. In 2006, Dr. Williams helped establish the Joint Quantum Institute, where he is a fellow. And he's also a fellow of the American Physical Society and the AAAS. Carl, would you like to present your first slide? And let me see if I can advance it. Good. Here we are.
So, what's the impact from a NIST program? I mean, NIST has basically been doing quantum information science since we started playing with clocks 70 years ago. So it's clocks and Josephson junctions that are used for voltage standards that are the basis of it. If you look at us for our small agency, we really hit way above our weight. If you look in the Web of Science and you look at all things like whether it's quantum computing or quantum communication or quantum sensing, what you will see is we rank number 10 in the world in total number of publications. And so, we really have a very big and broad program. We've had it for years, in part because it affects our bottom line mission. And our formal program started in the year 2000. We have activities in sensing metrology. Within the US, there are two agencies that keep time for the US government, USNO and NIST. We are the reporting agency back to the BIPM in Paris, where all things are coordinated for universal time. But we share that responsibility with USNO, who provides the GPS system for our country. We have efforts in quantum communication, quantum simulation, quantum computing. So we've had a very, very broad program for a number of years, looking at the full range of things that we can do. 3 to 5 year outlook, NIST effort will continue to grow. This is largely because as we move to trying to go to farther and farther into the high-tech standards, it typically puts a stress on our measurement systems, whether we're trying to measure extremely small voltages or we're trying to measure precisely where you are on a cell, on a chip. You basically use quantum tricks to get there, because these are the best tricks that there are available. And in some cases, we now know we can do trade-offs with that using quantum 2.0 type technology. So we have, our program is fairly mature, and as we go forward, we're looking at three things. One, what I would call foundational quantum science and metrology. Here, one of the things that happened this past year is there was a major redefinition of the Treaty of the Meter. The Treaty of the Meter now is based upon basically the standard model of particle physics. And because we fixed a bunch of constants, and that constrains the metric system. But as a result, if you unify gravity with the standard model, it may break something. And so we have a very stable system now, but it's better capable of looking at how we might break it. So we will look at that. We will build better clocks to test those modalities, make new measurement modalities. We're looking at engineering and applying this research to build robust components, in part because the state-of-the-art is often available in our labs. You send us something, we will characterize it, we will measure it against our best things, we will stand it back to you in 6 weeks. Most manufacturers would rather have something that's calibrated and operating on their floor that will give them the correct answer or no answer at all. And so we are looking at taking these modalities and everything else, miniaturizing them, putting them in a package fit to form to where they're robust enough to give you what you need when you need it at a cost point that is appropriate to your application. And so this is all going to be based on taking the tricks that we have learned out of it. So our hope is that we use this to basically really revolutionize the services we provide to the broad public and improve measurement science in the United States.
Thank you, Carl. Our next panelist is Jalal Mapar. Dr. Mapar is Senior Advisor for Future Technologies at the Department of Homeland Security. He has managed large portfolios of programs for ensuring the nation's preparedness and response systems. He has been recognized many times for his contributions to federal service. Jalal?
Thank you. If you forward that slide. That's not us.
I think you have the order wrong, I think.
Yeah,
I think I'm
pass
supposed to
that
be next.
No, we have both. But
Just move it
there you
forward.
go.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
Thank you. I thought by way of sharing with you, rather than technical information, some ideas about what the department is and what we do, it would help you understand what our mission is, what our requirements are, and how to help you understand some of the use cases that would benefit this nation. I think the best way to do that, think about the DHS. We are the third largest federal government agency, 220,000 employees total. Majority of the work is challenging nation safety and security, very much operational. I come from the Science and Technology Directorate, which is part of headquarters. On a daily basis, just to give you an idea, this is available on public DHS website. As you know, DHS has got several components, among them TSA, Customs Border Protection, Secret Service, Coast Guard, etc. But just imagine what we deal with on a daily basis. Our TSA colleagues on a daily basis have to deal with 2 million passengers a day, 1 million bags a day. CBP has to deal with 82,000 containers a day. They have to process at ports of entry about 1.2 million people coming in and going. And when you look at all of these things, these are not just numbers, but in order to arrive at issues that relate with things like identity management or cybersecurity, or looking at the critical infrastructure, things like energy, finance, transportation, communication, emergency management, and so on, where we have to worry about threats and risks. In order to do these things, we're dealing with a lot of data, a lot of processing, and not to even mention the issues that we have to deal with in terms of positioning, navigation, and timing that really affects the critical infrastructure. So you put all of that together, I can tell you that DHS is a very data-rich environment. Relative to quantum technologies, quantum information sciences, any of those, right now the department is not investing anything because we are now getting into understanding what these things are. Because DHS is a data-rich environment, we are trying to understand what everybody is doing in this area. For that reason, one of the reasons I represent DHS at the National Science Technology Council Quantum Information Sciences Subcommittee. That's an organization that's out of the executive branch, White House, Office of Science Technology Policy. That subcommittee is run by Jake Taylor. Some of you may know him. And I'd also like to recognize Corey Stambaugh. Corey, you're here. There we go. And Corey is also involved in that. That subcommittee recently established what's called an end-user working group. And together with my colleague from NIH, Geetha, who's going next, and Corey and myself, we're the co-chairs of this working group. So the importance of that working group is the reason we are here today. And we want to share with you what our needs are, what the mission sets are that we are interested in. We want to connect with the vendors, with the researchers, with industry, and share with you some of the issues that we're facing and look to you to help us solve some of those problems. So my mission in being here is to connect, provide that awareness and coordination. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Geetha Senthil. She is a a director at the National Institutes of Health, NIH. Dr. Senthil has served in several leadership roles at the NIH, overseeing the mission and progress of critical scientific programs aimed at accelerating genetic discovery. She's been instrumental in the conceptualization and development of critical cross-cutting initiatives at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Senthil.
Thank you for that. And thank you for Jalal for introducing here. Many of you might be wondering why NIH is here at the table. And I would like to share an end user perspective. We are users of this technology. This is quite new to us, especially the computing, the quantum dots, and quantum mechanical information and algorithms are used in NMR and imaging technologies, but not the computational aspects. And here I will introduce you a few examples from neuroscience as it relates to human brain function and behavior in both normal and disease conditions. I come from one of the NIH institutes called National Institute of Mental Health, focused on understanding human brain function and disorders such as schizophrenia, autism, bipolar, and also understanding in general the normal patterns of behavior and when it goes wrong and becomes disease. So this is a figure to illustrate the computational challenges that we are currently facing in our field. This is a multi-level, multi-scale computational problem which involves many-to-many mapping. I would like to start with the levels of analysis, biological levels of analysis. When we attempt to connect genes to behavior in a causal way, we are posed with a really large computational challenge because of this high-dimensional and highly interdependent and time-dependent information and complex measurements at each level, at the level of genes and gene networks, molecules, cells, and brain circuits, and how the functional connectivity between the circuits define human behavior. And this is not only a big data problem, but also a computational algorithmic problem. It is currently pushing the limits of classical systems that our researchers are using. And we are hoping that quantum algorithms could be of immediate use in this space, especially machine learning algorithms and optimization methods and simulation techniques from quantum sciences would be extremely valuable for our sciences, especially the neuroscience. Now, I would like to say that this is a limited perspective. There are many other biomedical problems that share similar issues in terms of computation, high dimensionality, and big data, and time-intensive, process-intensive computations. So we are seeking innovative computational algorithmic solutions for these problems, and I'm hoping that some of you would be interested in solving biomedical or providing biomedical solutions to biomedical sciences And I know some of you expressed that drug discovery is an area which NIH is particularly interested in, but beyond that, there are other data science challenges that we are very much interested to solve with you and collaborate with you.
Very good, thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Rupak Biswas. He is the director of the Exploration Technology Directorate at NASA. And he's responsible for coordinating advanced supercomputing, human systems integration, and intelligent systems. Dr. Biswas.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Okay. Well, glad to be here. I thought I'd do, in the 3-4 minutes that I have been allocated, to give you a more of a kind of an overall picture of what we've been doing in quantum within NASA. As many of you know, NASA is a mission agency, so we are more interested in, landing humans on the moon. Many of you have heard about the Artemis program. We have Viper, which is a rover which is going to go to the South Pole as a prospector. We want to go to Mars. We want to bring samples back from Mars. We have programs like the Low Boom Flight Demonstrator, where we want to fly supersonic over land. We have the James Webb Space Telescope. We want to find, planets that are in the habitable zone in the universe. So those are the kinds of missions that NASA has. But in order to do that, we need enabling technologies. And supercomputing, of course, is one of that, and that leads us into quantum computing. And we have been doing quantum computing, or at least dabbling in it, since 2012. In fact, Matt Johnson and I had the first Q2B conference at Ames. And so what I thought I'd give you is kind of show you the kind of the different areas that we are working in, and kind of broken up into 5 basic areas. One, of course, is working to understand some of the fundamental physics of the underlying hardware, both to understand the quantum mechanical effects that happen at different hardware. We are not going to build hardware at NASA, but we are interested in trying to see what Google or D-Wave or Rigetti or anyone else, for that matter, are doing. And not only try to understand the hardware characteristics, but try to also kind of do modeling of those hardware features that we could leverage. And this is exactly what we do in supercomputing as well. The next area that we are working on, and some of these things that we are working on now, some of these things will obviously advance over time, but advances in quantum algorithms and solvers also advances the field of classical solvers. There's always an inherent competition between the quantum world and the classical world, and so that when insights come out of quantum computing, that actually advances the field of classical methods as well, and that could have, side benefits out of that activity. And then, of course, hardware is one thing. We can talk about hardware, but if you look at how we do classical computing now, very few of us have a very clear understanding of caches and TLB misses and how the memory hierarchy works, and we don't really care. We just want it to work. And so there has to be equivalent activity in quantum tools, software stacks, programming languages, APIs, all of that is so that we are able to interact at a more higher level with these underlying complex hardware. And then, of course, given that the hardware is different, given that the software is different, you'll have to come up with algorithms that can take advantage of that underlying hardware. And then finally, tying it all back, for NASA, going back to what I said initially, it's all about the applications that we care about. At the end of the day, I'm less interested in whether a particular hardware has entanglement or not. I just want to know, can this hardware solve a problem that NASA cares about that I cannot solve on a classical machine? And then finally, given that we have space assets, we are also interested in all of the quantum computing, the communication and the network activities, given that we are heavily invested in space assets in terms of satellites, given that we'll have humans in space, and given that we are also heavily involved in urban air mobility and air traffic management, and you'll have these millions of drones flying around that will require some sort of optimization and communication. Those are other areas that we're interested in as well. kind of tying it back to answer one of the questions that Joe had, where are these things relevant to NASA? For example, like I said, if you look from the top, the robust network design, how do you actually communicate in some sort of a trusted fashion among all the various assets? Quantum-enhanced machine learning is going to be one of the big areas as well. And then, about the whole broad area of planning and scheduling. So these are, again, examples of what we are focused on. But there's many more, and we are looking forward to how quantum technologies can advance the NASA mission. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our fifth panelist is Dr. William Vanderlinde. Dr. Vanderlinde is Acting Director of the Advanced Computing Technology Division in the Office of Science at the Department of Energy. Prior to this, he was Acting Deputy Director and Chief Scientist at ARPA. And he was the Nanotechnology Group Leader at the Laboratory for Physical Sciences. Bill is also an ASM Fellow. Bill?
Thank you. So with a budget of $6 billion, the Office of Science at DOE is the largest funder of basic science research in the United States. Of that, about 100 million is being directed towards quantum science in the current fiscal year. And that's across the 6 different offices that you see listed there. I work in the Advanced Scientific Computing Research, or OSCR, which is primarily focused on conventional computing. We fund the leadership class systems at the national labs, such as Summit at Oak Ridge, which you've heard mentioned several times today. We do also fund quantum science research. In particular, we have an effort in creating test beds at the laboratories for use by laboratory and non-laboratory personnel. That's roughly a $50 million effort over 5 years. We have another effort in applications, which includes algorithms, software stack, and V&V. Another roughly $50 million over a 5-year effort. And just recently, we launched an optical quantum network program at about $3 million per year. Our colleagues in basic energy science actually have the largest effort, roughly $50 million per year. It's focused on material development as well as infrastructure for quantum information science. And then we have biological and environmental research. I bet a lot of folks here didn't realize the Department of Energy actually does biological research. Those folks are focused largely on quantum sensors that could be used for biological imaging. Fusion energy sciences, very much interested in plasmas, looking at sensors and computing for plasmas. Their effort's about $5 million per year, as is the biological and energy research group. High energy physics, do a wide variety of things related to the basic structure of matter and the cosmology of the universe. Their efforts are around $10 million per year. The holy grail for them would be to develop a dark matter sensor using quantum technology. And then finally, we have nuclear physics, again, around $5 million per year, looking at devices and sensors and algorithms for nuclear physics. So overall, that's about 100 million per year. That does not include the quantum centers. As you may be aware, about a year ago, the National Quantum Initiative was signed into law. Among other things, it calls upon the Department of Energy to develop up to 5 quantum centers with funding of up to $25 million per center. We anticipate that we'll release the solicitation for that shortly after we receive our full FY 2020 appropriation. So far, we've had 2 short-term continuing resolutions, which didn't allow us to release the BIA yet, but we anticipate doing so shortly. So all of this funding is towards quantum information science. Largely is directed towards the national labs, such as Brookhaven, for example, which has a booth around the corner. in the ballroom. Some of that funding does go to universities and private industry as well, with the overall goal of doing really good science to support the energy mission.
Thank you, Bill. So I'd like to just point out also that Bill and Carl currently sit on the governing board of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. They represent the United States government on the consortium, and both have a deep understanding of both the public and private sector issues around quantum information science, and represent the government on the board. I think you'll agree that we have a very diverse set of agencies here. We have Commerce, Homeland Security, Health, Space, and Energy. And that really represents a very diverse array of federal agencies. So what I'd like to do is, this is an opportunity for questions to come from the audience, as well as I've prepared a set of questions. But I'll ask the first one, but I'd love for some audience engagement with this outstanding group of panelists. So I'll start off with this question, and let's just go right down the row, if you would, starting with Carl. What is the number one way that the U.S. government or your agency can make a substantial difference to the growth of the quantum industry in the U.S.?
So again, under the NQI Act, this was basically charged with setting up this consortium. This is very novel. I mean, there are many consortiums in the U.S. and everything else, but this one is quite novel. I mean, this is a very nascent early field. We know it's going to become a major pusher for technology in the future. We don't know the end applications. And again, some of the agencies that sit in at the table are trying to figure out those end applications. But we felt that as part of the Department of Commerce and part of our responsibility as a neutral agent within and being non-regulatory, we could bring all of industry together and begin to ask, what are the common kind of infrastructure tools you need? What is your supply chain going to look like? What are the things that will not only enable industry to move faster, but keep all of our scientists in academia from going and building a new laser system or building something else, because they can now go out and buy it? So what are the common components and things that will become part of a complex supply chain? Because again, if you go look at a smartphone or something else, it doesn't matter whose smartphone you have. When you're done, there are millions of components in there from lots of different vendors. And so we're trying to build that out and ensure that we have the components, whether they are for economic reasons or for national security reasons.
Completely agree with what Carl said. It just reminded me of this morning during the early discussion, the Wayne Gretzky's quote about, if you don't try, you're going to miss 100% of those shots. From our perspective at DHS, because we consider ourselves as a very much user agency, as a user of these technologies, quantum technologies, there are a couple things that we're thinking about. One is, as Carl said, we are not even sure if this is real. You talk to one community, they tell you it's hype, the other community says this is happening. So we would like to, as somebody who's trying to promote looking at emerging technologies, I would like us to hedge our bets that something is going to come out of this. In order to do that, we want to engage and let you know about some of our missions. So the more you know about what we're doing and how your technologies could find applications sooner than later, I think that's our contribution to the research development, the R&D community, the industries involved in this, academics and so on. We can help you get there a little bit faster by offering, shall we say, ourselves as maybe a test bed of some sort. And if you come to me and ask for data, you're not going to get it immediately, I can guarantee you that, because there are so many sensitivities with the information data that we have. But I would like for you to think about us as you think about your R&D program and solve these challenging problems.
For NIH, we are a funding agency, and also we have intramural research. The way we could help advance quantum information sciences is to connect the product developers such as you with academic investigators and also other funding offices within NIH to conduct a workshop and exchange information and make you aware of the problems we are interested to solve that are amenable to the quantum solutions. And we have done that 2 years ago. We had a joint workshop with several company representatives here, including IonQ, Google, IBM, Microsoft, and neuroscientists, genomists, computational biologists, to brainstorm and identify what specific problems that quantum solutions or quantum information sciences can currently address in our field. So that is something we could help. And also we are funding agency, as I said, we can develop funding opportunity announcements to stimulate more application-oriented research or development of products through our small business program, where any of you're welcome to apply if through our standard routes for small business grants. There are contract mechanisms also, but that is not yet developed. So it is very important for us to see use case that you can demonstrate that the technologies and algorithms that you applied can solve at least a simple biological problem we are facing. I can give you one example, is an optimization problem and machine learning algorithms. These are very relevant to biomedical sciences. We are dealing with the same problems of what you are trying to solve for financial world and simulations. How can you simulate neuronal function or a cellular system? So the problems, the solutions you developed for other industries may be very well can be translated to the problems we are trying to address, because the underlying nature of the problems are similar across these various fields.
Rupak, what is the number one way that NASA can make a substantial difference?
So I think a lot of good points were made. I think as a government agency, especially like for NASA, given that we are a kind of a science and research technology agency, I think the couple of things we need to do is we need to be a trusted partner with the commercial sector. And we have to be able to subsume some of the risk that comes with such a novel, disruptive technology. This is only that the government can do. And so there is a requirement that the government is a true partner in these developments. And then, of course, I think one of the things that we need to do as a government agency as well is to provide a true assessment of the state of the art among all the hype that is going on. Everybody has a certain vested interest about quantum computing and what it can do. And I think with all the agencies here, we can provide some sort of a normalization in some sense, or actual, educate the people, because there's all these misconceptions out there that suddenly, everything is going to break or we will have, quantum computers in our hip pockets. Neither of which is going to be true, though, soon.
Very good. Thank you. Bill?
Okay, so the test beds that we have at the national laboratories are a resource both for government and non-government researchers. We also are investing heavily in infrastructure. And I think when we do launch the quantum centers under the National Quantum Initiative, you'll see significant support for quantum information science infrastructure.
Very good, thank you. So we were fortunate to hear from AFRL this morning and also get a DOD view of things. Let me see if there's a question from the audience. Yes, there's one right here in the front. If somebody could grab a mic. Thank you.
Hello. I'm wondering if there are any global initiatives to leverage the international community of the world, because you guys represent pretty much the entire U.S. agencies, and it would be interesting to hear if there are any global initiatives planned. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, how important is international collaboration to your agencies?
So I think if you will look at the report that was released by the subcommittee, we talked about international engagement in basic R&D. And so we as a nation have taken the view that it's a science-first approach. There's so much that is not understood that we need to engage with all of our international partners. So that is one place that we're looking. And again, OSCP and the agencies are being engaged in a number of bilaterals with different countries in the last year. In addition, within the QEDC, we will, once we are fully established, be working with what we will call Tier 2 members, which will be foreign companies. And so we are working on that process and everything else. There, the issue is that when you come back to the big system integrators, again, whether it's a computing company or communications or something else, they will tell you that their supply chains are global. There is no reason for the U.S. to spend billions of dollars setting up a new capability here when you can go buy it from Germany or some other country. So we understand that the world is global. We will continue to work with those who are like-minded and believe in our basic principles of an open and fair market in which IP is protected. So we hope to engage internationally. It is very important for us to be effective.
Just an information bit for you. Within DHS, Science and Technology Directorate, where I reside, on behalf of the department, we have about 12 or 13 bilateral government-to-government bilateral agreements with 12, 13 countries, among those the Five Eyes and plus more. And we use those mechanisms that we have in place to do joint collaborative R&D programs. And I would also add that you might want to connect with Corey, because he was talking to me earlier about there's an activity coming up next week where I think NSTC subcommittee chair is going to be dealing with EU activities and so on. So you can follow up with that.
Who else would like to tackle the international collaboration? Yes, Rupak.
I can just chime in. I think I agree with what has been said. That's a good question. International collaboration is important. Again, for an agency like NASA, we collaborate all the time with all of the different countries. Think about the International Space Station. But we have to be a little careful here. It's a little balanced approach, because just like Carl said, we do not want to spend billions of dollars doing things that we can buy from someone else. However, this is a very disruptive and a potentially powerful technology. So there is importance in the US retaining leadership in this field. So we have to be careful. So it's just a matter of doing the trade-offs.
Yeah. Okay. Any others on international? Okay. Let me thank you for that question. The international collaboration is clearly very, very important, and also in the private sector, the QEDC, we certainly recognize that, and it's an outreach that in the spring of this coming year will be very active in engaging the international community and those that are in the community that really do adhere to the rule of law, that are for free and open scientific collaboration and honor intellectual property rights. That's important to our corporate members within the QEDC, and it's important to our government.
I would also like to add for international, I think it's really important, even for end-user applications, is to put together multiple perspectives of if I'm trying to solve a problem in this country, maybe there are people in other countries trying to solve the same kind of problems. And a collaborative effort from end-user perspective, not only developing conducting basic research in quantum information sciences, but also how best to apply it and how best to find those contexts is an international effort.
Great. Another question here? Sure. Yes.
So there's a natural balance and a natural healthy tension between progress and protection. And that's sort of a key role, I think, for sovereign entities everywhere, but especially the US government. And when we think about that, and we look at the folks here on the panel, this is great focus on progress. And one of the challenges that I think a lot of industries are going to have is the protection side. When we think about the regulatory environments that are necessary, we think about our regulatory partners in the form of the FDA, things like that in certain industries. How are we going to work together to get that right healthy tension between protecting patients in the case of quantum-enabled drug discovery or quantum-enabled patient selection or any of these types of use cases that might come? And that applies to, I think, to all the regulated industries, finance, things like that. So what role do you see as sort of the government enablers of progress to help us work with the government protection groups that are part of that?
Great, thank you for that question. Carl, do you want to lead off with that?
So again, NIST is a standards organization, and if you want our products and our capabilities to be available to others, we have to agree internationally to those standards. And this goes into drug effectiveness, it goes into radiopharmaceuticals, it goes into knowing that my volt and the Chinese volt or the Russian volt or the South African volt are all the same volt, because we push electricity across borders and everything else. So there at some level on the basic research on the measurement science things, everything is global and international, and we have to work there. Then there are the areas where you come back in and something is so sensitive and the military sensitivities are there. Okay, well, there are places where we are going to have export controls. But I would hope that this technology is nascent enough and early enough that we think about whether it is time and whether it's appropriate, and that you don't do everything, because again, if you will look at modern technology, the components are coming from everywhere, and so we have to figure out how to do that while protecting our borders and doing what is essential to our safety and security. And again, if a general purpose quantum computer comes along that breaks all of our public key infrastructure, that's a disaster internationally. We move billions and billions of dollars every day across borders, and those are all encrypted technologies and everything else. So we are in this together, and we live on one Earth.
Yes.
I'll just add, I agree with what was just said, but this is, again, like many things, I think it is a kind of a push-pull thing, because technology is going to move forward whether lawyers and policymakers like it or not. And then there is the regulatory part of it. Think about autonomy and self-driving cars. Just think about it. If a self-driving car gets into an accident, who is at fault? Is it the manufacturer of the car? Is it the owner of the car? Is it the person who developed the software? Who actually is at fault? And so there are all these kinds of things are going to come up. And I think it is not, all I'm trying to say is that this is not specific to quantum. This is a problem of where regulations and policies and rules are always trying to catch up with technology.
I want to add to that is because of this disruptive nature of this technology and the need for innovation and progress, the balance, I think we ought to be thinking of a new regulatory framework to establish principles and guidelines of how best to maintain balance between these two. And this is not out there. This regulatory framework doesn't currently exist. And because the progress is happening so rapidly, and I heard today, there are difference of opinions that some said it's maybe a matter of years or too short term to have a functional, high-fidelity quantum computer. Before it arrives, hits the ground, and people start using it, it may be important to have some regulatory framework in place before problem occurs. You need to be thinking and figuring out before most of some of the regulations occur after the problem, after there is a problem. You don't want to face that because we don't know the nature of the problem that we'll face with this technology. And
very good. I see that this has gone just way too fast, and we've had some really good questions from the audience here. Let me open it up to a question of is there something you'd like to add here in terms of just commentary, a question maybe you wish you were asked that you could answer here?
Can I go first?
Please.
This is a really near and dear topic to me. As I mentioned before, for our department agency, we're looking at this as a user agency. We deal with a lot of operational people. They're not technology people per se. And one of the challenges that I have observed that I'd like to share with you for you to help us is, how can we dumb this down from this abstract level so that the user community can understand and associate with and figure out how some of the problems that we're facing can be solved by this promise of quantum technologies. Just imagine, on a daily basis, as I mentioned before, we process 2 million passengers per day at the airports. It's not just get in and go out. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, even before you even get to the airport. Your information has to be vetted, processed, and all of this. And including myself, when you get stuck in a TSA line, everybody just moans and groans, how can we do this faster? So just imagine if we could process that with the promise of this quantum computer so much faster that by the time you even get to the gate, your information has been analyzed, processed, Monte Carlo 1 million times, and it's just happening all the time quickly, and so on. How do I explain that to our operational components so that they appreciate and they become your advocate for you? That's the basic thing that I would have for you.
Yeah.
I have one suggestion. That breakout groups are currently missing from this 3-day meeting. It would be really helpful to have breakout sessions, to arrange brainstorming sessions with end users and developers. So we can identify, once you come out of that breakout session, you have identified a set of concrete problems to work and companies to collaboratively work on, and that is a missed opportunity, I think, for this kind of meeting. It's wonderful that so many companies are together here, and I'm sad to see that none of the large user communities missing. At least representatives from those communities are here with you. It would be wonderful to have those discussions and use part of this meeting for that. You will get a lot of out of that, such discussions.
Very good. Rupak, do you have any closing?
Not a question per se, but perhaps a commentary. I think we need to continue to pursue parallel paths. I think this is a really exciting technology, and I think there's a lot that can be done in the short term, in the sense leveraging the technologies or capabilities that we have already done, for example, with NIST hardware and all of that. And then we need to continue to push the envelope for future development. One thing that was perhaps discussed yesterday, and I was not here yesterday, is that maybe we could also look at hybrid quantum classical algorithms where we use quantum QPUs as, say, accelerator technologies that can work with in a more tightly coupled fashion, just like we do in supercomputing, where we have GPUs embedded with, NVIDIA GPUs embedded with Intel processors or something like that. Is there a way to somehow get some of these novel quantum hardware tightly coupled with classical systems? And maybe we can make some progress there in the near term while we chase the Holy Grail.
Okay. Bill?
Well, I would just say beware the hype. We need to be in this for the long term, investing in the research. We can't depend on there being a killer app for a 50 to 100 qubit NIST type system. I'm hopeful that there will be, but I haven't seen good evidence for it yet.